Hello, art enthusiasts and supporters of my work. I'm going to start recording stories behind some of my artwork and what's going on with me. Some of you know I have recently delivered one painting called The Lady of Nigeria. It's a pastel painting. I delivered that to a new gallery that I get to exhibit in. It's called the 480 Lighthouse Gallery. It's a large, beautiful space in Pacific Grove, California. And I was extremely honored and excited to get one piece juried into that show. And then after I finished the registration and set up the delivery of that piece, I found out that the gallery is also sponsoring a contest with wonderful cash prizes. And it's a different kind of contest. They have 2 walls with large wood MDF panels, and they are they partitioned it off into 16-inch squares. I believe there's 72 16-inch squares. And if you want to enter the contest, you have to use their acrylic paints and do the work there on location. They randomly assigned each person their square, and you can't change if you don't like your square's location. So when I delivered my painting to be on display in the gallery, I worked on that 16-inch square. And I thought I would give you a little insight into how I prepared for that. It's even though I'm used to using an easel, I usually have the easel at a little bit of a slant, and that board that I was going to be painting on was straight up and down, of course, just part of the wall. And I ended up having to use a ladder, which was a little tricky, but I was able to do it. But the prep work before I went is I looked through all my reference photos to find something I thought would make a good composition in a square. And I also wanted to paint something I was familiar with, not something new, so that I could paint faster. So I chose koi. And although I've painted a lot of koi and watercolor, I've really only done one koi painting in acrylic. But the one I did in acrylic before was a 20 by 20 inch, and I used a palette knife primarily, so it was very loose. Once I decided on which image I thought was best, I cropped it into the square and printed it out. Had my husband help me print it out. And this is roughly what it looked like. This is the picture that I chose to use, the reference photo. And I actually did a watercolor using this reference photo also, but in a portrait orientation. And so then I went about practicing how I might paint this. And my first attempt was to use just a piece of pretty stiff watercolor paper, but I used acrylic, and I measured the square. In this particular situation, I actually traced the image. I didn't trace, I used carbon paper, which is basically tracing, to get the basic shapes in the basic location that I wanted them. And then I went ahead and painted them in acrylic on this watercolor paper to kind of test both my composition and shadows and movement in the water and all of that. Then when I was finished, I divided the piece, drew these grid lines, because I was planning on using this as my reference primarily when I was on location painting. And as it turns out, I did use a combination of both while I was there painting. I taped these on a space where it wouldn't damage someone else's work. And I was able to go back and forth between the photo and the watercolor paper. But I also, when I did this one, I didn't do it flat, vertical, straight up and down. I sat at a desk doing this, and it was a little bit easier than normal. But again, I was just working on my composition primarily. So to practice painting on the board, I decided to do a little actual panel painting, and this was that practice. So again, I didn't get all the way finished, but with this one, I put my easel very vertical and held this in place tightly. And then I also set a timer to see, or a stopwatch, to see how long it would take me to paint, and paint it as fast as I could, because my goal was to do the painting at the 480 Lighthouse Gallery in one sitting, in one standing on a ladder. But I only had, well, I had about 3 hours, and I was distracted, and there was a lot of up and down off the ladder, and I didn't get it finished in one go. So I ended up having the next almost full day, which was about 4 hours. So I went back the second day and added some more. And then on the last day I was in Pacific Grove, I did the final touch-ups. So I'll share the photo of my finished piece that's in that contest. And I want to invite you all to be sure and stop by 480 Lighthouse Gallery. Look at the wall where all of the paintings squares are. All the artists who submitted pieces were invited to enter the contest. Many are choosing not to for various reasons, but it was a fun experience, and I got to meet other artists who were there doing their painting, which again, it was in a tight space, and it made it a little bit difficult for us to work side by side, but everyone was gracious and patient and shared the space and the paints well, and it was a great experience, and I'm happy to have met some of the other coastal local artists. Again, 480 Lighthouse Gallery in Pacific Grove. It's a new, very energetic space, large, beautiful format for viewing art, great lighting, and I just want to invite you all to go and check it out.